The House will come to order. Members will be in their seats. The clerk has opened the roll, and you may record your presence. Please rise and give attention to our guest chaplain, Reverend Richard Suttermeyer, Family Life Church of the Nazarene, Topeka, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance, led by Representative Wheeler.
Before we begin today, the chaplain of the Kansas House, Reverend Eunice Brubaker, begins chemo treatment. So let us observe a moment of silence to lift her up in our thoughts and prayers. Almighty God, as we progress forward with the work that is before this legislative body, we continue to seek your wisdom and direction to make right and just decisions. The moment we spent in prayer for our chaplain reminds us of the deep need that so many in our great state also have for healing. We never want to forget, to omit, or neglect them in the circumstances which they face. Where there is physical need, we ask for hearts of compassion to know how to offer hope and comfort. Where there is emotional need, we ask for the ability to provide care and concern for their deep-seated needs. Where there is monetary need, we ask for your divine provision in order to assist them as they seek to work their way through their circumstances. Where there is spiritual need, we ask for you to move in them and over them so that they will experience the depths of your shalom, deep-seated contentedness. Most of all, we ask for your heart of compassion and love to undergird everything we are tasked to consider and act on. We thank you for giving us this day. In Jesus' name I pray these things. Amen.
Has every member had the opportunity to record his or her presence? The clerk will close the roll and take the attendance. Representative Trimmer on a point of personal privilege.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In 1888, Winfield Public Schools became the first public school district in the United States to include orchestra as a part of its curriculum. Last Saturday, the Winfield Orchestra program celebrated its 130th year. 170 students are currently enrolled in the Winfield program. Winfield is a 4A school. The 6th grade has an orchestra of 40. The 7th grade has an orchestra of 26. The 8th grade has an orchestra of 27. The freshman class has an orchestra of 21, and the high school orchestra has 56 students enrolled. A number of these students are members of the Southwestern College Youth Symphony and or the South Kansas Regional Symphony. A number of them were also named to the South Central KMEA District Honor Orchestra and the KMEA State Honor Orchestra. Members of the Winfield High School Orchestra at the well today include, and if you'd raise your hand when I recognize you, Julie Stavanza, Michelow Hall, Madison Thayer, Hannah Seidel, James Yeager, Madeline Stanton, Garrett Martin, Shelley Morin, Chandler Olmsted, and Orchestra Director Robbie Banks. The remaining students are in the orchestra, and you'll see a number of them. They're wearing their best dress. Please join me in recognizing the 130th year tradition of excellence displayed by the Winfield Public School Orchestra Program. Mr. Speaker, I request that my words be spread across the journal.
Without objection, so ordered. Representative Heiberger on a point of personal privilege.
Well, good morning, bodies. And I'd like you to join me today in recognizing the Kansas Volunteer Commission. The Kansas Volunteer Commission is one of 52 state service commissions nationwide, and it engages the staff and the governor-appointed commissioners to achieve its mission of empowering all Kansans to meet community needs through service. The Kansas Volunteer Commission manages the $1.4 million AmeriCorps Volunteer Kansas portfolio. Very good. Supports mentoring organizations. I was wondering where they were. It does support mentoring organizations through the Kansas Mentors and provides funding, training, and resources to volunteer organizations throughout the state. The Kansas Volunteer Commission determines social needs in our state, sets policy and program priorities, competitively awards grants to local nonprofits and agencies, provides training and technical assistance, monitors grantees to ensure compliance with federal and state laws, and helps Kansas tap the power of citizens to solve problems and strengthen our communities. Joining me today from the Kansas Volunteer Commission, we have Jessica Noble, Stephanie Cupper, Amy Pinger, Dee McKee, and Hannah Odette. So colleagues, please join me in recognizing and welcoming the members of the Kansas Volunteer Commission. And Mr. Speaker, I request that my remarks be spread across the journal.
Without objection, so ordered. Introduction of bills and concurrent resolutions. The clerk will read.
House Bill number 2773 by the Committee on Appropriations, an act concerning school districts, creating the Kansas Safe and Secure Schools Act, creating the School Safety and Security Grant Fund, making and concerning appropriations for the fiscal year ending June 30, 2019 for the Department of Education. House Bill number 2774 by the Committee on Taxation, an act concerning the state health care benefits program, designating employees of certain charitable organizations as eligible for coverage thereto.
Messages from the governor. The clerk will read.
Message to the Kansas House of Representatives. Enclosed herewith is Executive Order Number 1810. For your information, it concerns Governor's Education Council. Jeff Collier, Governor.
Messages from the Senate. The clerk will read.
Announcing passage of House Bill 2502 and House Bill 2470 as amended.
H.R. 6050. The clerk will read.
House Resolution Number 6050 by Representatives Mason, Barker, and others. A resolution strengthening the sister state relations between the state of Kansas and the Republic of China, Taiwan, supporting the signing of a bilateral trade agreement between Taiwan and the United States, and reaffirming support for increasing Taiwan's international profile. Whereas the state of Kansas and Taiwan entered into a sister state relationship in 1989, whereas Taiwan shares the same values as Kansas regarding freedom, democracy, the rule of law, and respect for human rights. Whereas Kansas and Taiwan have enjoyed a long and mutually beneficial relationship and anticipate continually growing that relationship, with Taiwan ranking as Kansas' third largest import country and 12th largest export destination in 2016. Whereas negotiations for a fair and reciprocal bilateral trade agreement between Taiwan and the United States are an important step toward further strengthening bilateral trade, thereby increasing Kansas's exports to Taiwan and promoting two-way investments. Whereas Kansas and Taiwan signed a memorandum of understanding on the mutual recognition and exchange of driver's licenses in September 2017, which provides more convenience for people from both Kansas and Taiwan. Whereas Taiwan, as a responsible stakeholder and contributor in the international community, is seeking to meaningfully participate in the World Health Organization, International Civil Aviation Organization, and International Criminal Police Organization. Now therefore be it resolved by the House of Representatives of the state of Kansas, number one, that Kansas praises Taiwan's mature and vital democracy and celebrates the 29th anniversary of sister state relations. Number two, that Kansas supports the signing of a bilateral trade agreement between the United States and Taiwan and welcomes even closer bilateral trade investment ties. And number three, that Kansas supports Taiwan's appropriate participation in international organizations which impacts the health, safety, and well-being of its people.
Representative Mason for a motion on H.R. 6050.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Good morning, colleagues. This morning we will vote on the adoption of H.R. 6050, strengthening the sister state relations between the state of Kansas and Taiwan. In 2017, Taiwan was Kansas' 12th largest export market in the world and 5th largest export market in Asia, and that represented a total of $197 million. The goods Kansas exports to Taiwan include processed food products, agricultural products, computer and electronic products, leather and allied products, and many, many more. According to 2015 data, Taiwan contributes a total of 26,762 jobs in Kansas. There's some high-profile names, Taiwan-affiliated companies located in Kansas that you might recognize: Garmin, Hypertech Computers, and Sun Marble Company. An important development, as mentioned in the resolution, is that Kansas and Taiwan signed a memorandum of understanding in September of 2017. That was on the mutual recognition and exchange of driver's licenses. People from Kansas are now granted reciprocity for the driver's license in Taiwan if they work or live there, and vice versa. With us this morning is Director General Jerry Chang from the Taipei Economic and Cultural Office in Denver, and also Director Forster Lee. Mr. Chang has an impressive resume in government service to his nation. His career spans nearly 26 years and includes assignments in Singapore, Hungary, New York, to name a few. Body, please join me this morning in a warm welcome for our honored guest. Mr. Speaker, I move adoption of H.R. 6050.
You've heard the motion. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, no. The ayes have it, and the motion is adopted.
And Mr. Speaker, may I request my words be spread across the journal?
Without objection, so ordered. Representative Patton on a point of personal privilege.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Speaker. Since 1947, Youth of the Year has been the Boys and Girls Clubs of America's premier recognition program, celebrating the extraordinary achievements of club members. Each year, one exceptional young person from a Boys and Girls Club rises to the role of National Youth of the Year. The National Youth of the Year serves as both an exemplary ambassador for Boys and Girls Club youth and a strong voice for all of our nation's young people. The journey to being named National Youth of the Year begins locally and progresses to state, national, regional, and national levels, with an additional military phase for members affiliated youth centers on U.S. military installations. With me this morning are the following 2018 Youth of the Year candidates. Guys, just wave when I say your name. Christopher Burrell from the Boys and Girls Clubs of South Central Kansas. Tavion Gray, Boys and Girls Clubs, Hutchison. Ruth Gathengary from Boys and Girls Club of Lawrence. Did I get close? Juliana Stevenson, Boys and Girls Club, Coffeyville. Ivy Alletti, Boys and Girls Club of Manhattan. Isabel Calle, Fort Riley Boys and Girls Club. And Carlos Vega, Fort Leavenworth Boys and Girls Club. Last night, Ruth Gathengary was named the State Youth of the Year, who will move on to regional and national competitions. And Isabel Calle was named Kansas Military Youth of the Year. Please join me in congratulating all of these outstanding students. Congratulations, guys. Congratulations. Mr. Speaker, I request that my remarks be spread across the journal.
Without objection, so ordered.
Thanks, guys.
Final action on House Bill 2757. The clerk will read.
House Bill number 2757 by the Committee on Taxation, an act concerning school districts relating to teacher contracts due process.
This constitutes final action on HB 2757. The clerk will open the roll, and you may record your vote. Has every member had the opportunity to record their vote? The clerk will close the roll. Does any member desire to explain his or her vote? Representative Humphreys.
Mr. Speaker, I vote no on HB 2757. Teachers, like those in my family, are professionals and culture makers in our communities. They should be called to the highest possible standards. Good teachers do not need state-mandated extra protections, and it does a disservice to the profession to offer state-mandated special protections to those who should not have them. Thank you.
Representative Whitmer.
Mr. Speaker, we vote no on House Bill 2757. Local control should be more than a campaign slogan we all use on our campaign postcards. If we truly believe in it, we should stand by it, not make exceptions when special interest unions declare they want a state mandate. House Bill 2757 undermines local control by involving the state in an area that belongs with local school boards that are duly elected by local citizens for the very purpose of deciding these policy questions. We believe in and stand with our quality teachers and against this infringement on local school districts. Representatives Whitmer, Eric Smith, Jacobs, Hauser, Carpenter, Delperdang, Dove, Williams, Powell, Landwehr, Berquist, Timish, Barker, Highland, Hawkins, Ressman, Rajas, Corbett, Hoffman, Weber, Esau, Osterman, and Awerkamp.
Representative Arneberg.
Mr. Speaker, I vote yes on House Bill 2757. Although I do support local control, I also see that our teachers do not feel valued in our great state, which is unfortunate. I do wish the paras and family support workers were a part of this bill, but I do understand that they are hourly employees and do not sign a contract. If this bill is successfully signed into law, then I look forward to no longer hearing that the state of Kansas has a teacher shortage, as due process seems to be argued as a recruiting tool. Representative Arnberger.
Representative Ralph.
I vote no on House Bill 2757. I support teachers having legal due process, but I do not support this legislation. Teachers should expect that they will not be terminated without good reason. Meaningful due process should derive from local boards. I cannot support legislation that allows a single person from outside of a community to usurp board authority. Communities elect school board members and charge them with this specific responsibility and authority. This legislation is an unwarranted interference in the local board's authority. We can do better. Hopefully, school districts will embrace due process in negotiated agreements to address their stated challenges of recruitment and retention. Representative Ralph.
Does any other member desire to explain his or her vote? Does any member desire to change his or her vote? Representative Clays votes no. Representative Johnson votes yes. Any other member? With 73 voted in favor and 48 against the passage of HB 2757, the same having received a constitutional majority, the bill is hereby declared passed. The clerk will record the vote. Final action, the clerk will read.
House Bill number 2758 by the Committee on Taxation and Act concerning school districts relating to publication of bullying policies.
This constitutes final action on HB 2758. The clerk will open the roll. You may record your vote. Has every member had the opportunity to record their vote? The clerk will close the roll. Does any member desire to explain his or her vote? Representative Hauser.
Mr. Speaker, Even though I support the anti-bullying provisions of House Bill 2758, I must vote against forcing our local school boards to implement an unfunded mandate. I just voted against a bill because it took local control from our school districts. I believe to take a stand means to take a stand. You cannot have it both ways just when it fits your agenda. Representative Hauser.
Any other explanation of vote? Does any member desire to change his or her vote? Representative Miller votes aye. (120) voted in favor and 1 against the passage of HB 2758. The same have received a constitutional majority. The bill is hereby declared passed. The clerk will record the vote. Majority Leader Heineman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move the House resolve itself into the Committee of the Whole for the purpose of considering those items appearing under the heading of General Orders.
You've heard the motion. All in favor say aye. Opposed, no. Motion carried. The chair appoints Representative Esau to chair the Committee of the Whole.
Good morning, body. The first item of business is House Bill 2572 for the purpose of carrying House Bill 2572. For the purpose of carrying House Bill 2572, the Chair calls on Representative Williams. Thank you.
I move the adoption of the committee report.
You heard the motion. All in favor say aye. Opposed say nay. Motion passes. You may continue.
Thank you. Have you ever felt like you just weren't quite organized, or you knew you had something but you just couldn't find it? That's how many of us feel when we're trying to track and identify what economic incentives we have. And so that is why I'm bringing this bill to you today, so we can talk about economic incentives and we can get to the place that we can actually evaluate those economic incentives. So let's, and also I want to bring up that according to the Pew Research Charitable Trust, last year they said in 2017 that Kansas is falling behind or trailing in the area of disclosure as well as criteria and evaluation of those tax credits and so forth. So that's why we're here. So what does this bill do? Number one, and I'll try to keep it brief and stand for all those questions, all economic incentives that provide more than $50,000 of annual incentives will be included in this bill. That would include all kinds of things from HPIP to PEAK to property tax exemptions, but it does not include sales tax exemptions. These incentives would be searchable, printable, available to access online, specifically the Department of Commerce on its homepage or a conspicuous link to another agency from the Department of Commerce homepage. What's going to need to be included? Well, first of all, if this bill is successful, you will be able to track economic incentives, whether it's a tax credit or something that is related to that. You'll be able to track it by county, by program, and by business or recipient. So what does that mean? If it's by county, I can point to my county, and I can find out all the different incentives that are coming into my county. What's working for my county? What are we taking advantage of? What are we not taking advantage of? And what is that total? If I want to know the program, if I want to know specifically how's a program doing, I can find out exactly how much in credits were provided from a program. And so I can learn about that, and I can see that year after year after year. And finally, I can find out by recipient or individual business. I cannot find out by the individual. This is not disclosing information about individuals except as related to principals and officers of STAR bonds. What will it do? It will make sure and provide a complete database that's, as I said, searchable, and it's going to have the most important information about the name of the business, the county of where that business is, and what are the qualifying criteria. And it also includes return on investment, compliance rate, and other items that are required already in statute. So if the statute says that they need to have an annual report for the program, then this provides the appropriate link to it. Really what this does is allows for the Department of Commerce and any other agency to really get organized so we can kind of see what we have. With that, I'll stand for questions.
The chair recognizes Representative Sawyer of Sedgwick.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I don't have any questions. I just rise in support of the bill. As the carrier of the bill said, this provides a lot of transparency and makes it easier for us to find a lot of information on these economic incentive programs. The bill would provide a lot of information. As she pointed out, on the STAR bonds, we would have recipients' names. We would have a lot of information there. It would include every property tax exemption. It would include every income tax credit except for the adoption tax credit, the earned income tax credit, the food sales tax credit, the homestead credit, and the dependent care tax credit. But all the other tax credits we would have information on. So it would be easier for us to find all this information of all the different incentives we have out there and all the tax credits we have out there, and give us the ability to evaluate these programs and see if they're working, and let us do our jobs better. So I rise in support of the bill.
The chair recognizes Representative Baker of Morris.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So when it comes to economic development, probably the best way to equate it is in the terms of a game. And it's a high-stakes game because in Kansas, we're trying to compete with surrounding states as well as states throughout the country. I spoke with some of the economic development people from cities over the break from this morning when we first heard about this bill, and former Representative Campbell was quite concerned about it because he was instrumental in some of the larger companies that came to the Johnson County area and some of the things that they were used, and the transparency on some of those things to a lay person who doesn't understand economic development certainly would not have been understood. Companies like FedEx, Trans Am, Garmin, Cargill and Spirit in Wichita, Mars here in Topeka, MBAB at K-State in Manhattan. Each one of those companies and each one of those projects have unique features that require knowledge in that industry. Industry uniqueness is very, very important when you're doing economic development. I like transparency. I'm a victim of STAR bonds. I've watched several of my businesses in my district get ran out by STAR bond projects, picking winners and losers behind the cloak of lack of transparency is understood. But I think we need a little more work on this bill, and I'd suggest we send this bill back to committee. Thank you.
Representative Baker, was that a motion?
I move we send the bill back to committee.
It's a debatable motion. There are people who would like to... Which committee?
The bill came...
Oh, sorry.
The bill came from tax, and I'd suggest we send it back to tax. Even though it's a commerce issue, currently the Commerce Department has some drama, so I think it probably belongs in the tax committee where it came from.
All right. To speak on the motion, Chair recognizes Representative Hawkins of Sedgwick. I'm sorry, Representative Williams of Sedgwick, Butler.
Would the carrier of the motion please stand for questions?
Sure.
Were those individuals that you spoke with, they were opposed to the bill?
They wanted more understanding on the bill, and they wanted more discussion on the transparency
Did they have an opportunity during the kind of the building of the bill, in which we had lots of individuals come to the table via email and sitting in my office? Did they have that opportunity to share their concerns? And did they have an opportunity to provide testimony when it was heard in committee? And did they have opportunity to talk to committee members regarding possible amendments or ways to improve it?
Representative, I don't believe they were aware of all that, but I'm certain that you heard lots of due diligence.
I would say that they would be aware of it, that they do pay attention to what happens in tax, and they were contacted prior to it being heard in tax. In fact, they provided a great deal of information from Commerce and Revenue with representatives in my office and lots of emails. This is the first that I've heard that there are issues. So, second question, do you have any on the bill, particularly if you want to send it back to tax, what particular items in the bill did they have concerns with, and can you help us understand that?
I'd be glad to come and visit with your tax committee about those individual items.
So you don't have them today?
No.
Okay, thank you. So I stand in opposition of sending it back to tax. Tax has done a thorough job vetting this issue and other issues related to exemptions and economic incentives. Look, Kansas is not where we want to be. We're doing this as a policy decision because that's our purview, to produce policy. We're doing this to help make things more organized. And there are plenty of safeguards in the bill that will not inhibit a deal that's being made. This doesn't apply until the deal is finished and it's the next fiscal year. Lots and lots of safeguards in it. And so I would ask you to stand in opposition to this bill, because currently we need some clarity in the information that's out there. We need that. And to wait while the other states are jumping right ahead, all of our peer states, they have this data available and they're still doing great with growth and providing the right type of economic incentives. Thank you.
Speaking to the motion, Chair recognizes Representative Hawkins of Sedgwick.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Body, this session, probably one of the themes of this session is transparency. I think we've all heard that theme pretty much through the whole session. And when we started out this session on this particular bill, and it went through some iterations before we actually had it ready to come to you all, we've made a lot of changes, but transparency has always been kind of forefront with this. People want to be able to evaluate if their tax dollars are being spent wisely, and that's exactly what this does. I was not listening probably as well as I should have, but one of the items that was changed just recently was ROI was put in there, because that was one of the things during our testimony that was said needs to be in there so people can really see this. So I really believe that this bill has its time. Can we do more later on? I'm sure we can, but this is a great first start at making this system work well and give our citizens the opportunity to be able to evaluate whether their tax dollars are being spent wisely on the tax credits and the different bonds. So I would ask you to go on ahead and continue to deliberate this, and let's get a vote today, and let's move this on out. Thank you.
Speaking to the motion, Chair recognizes Representative Carmichael of Sedgwick.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I rise in opposition to the motion. And first, I want to echo the good words of my friend from Wichita just a few moments ago. He describes the situation very accurately. The reason that I am here is because I do serve on the Commerce Committee, and my good friend, the representative from Florence, I almost heard it as Lawrence, but no, he's from Florence. But at any rate, we sit next to each other on that committee, and we both have great frustration with tax incentives because we don't know what they are, we don't know who gets them, we don't know what works, etc. And I would be the first to agree that I would like to perhaps have more information that may be available in this bill. But this is one very good start. we need this information as soon as possible because we need a bill now so that when we come back next year, those of us who are fortunate enough to come back next year, have a starting place in the Commerce Committee to make the changes and demand the accountability that is required here. Now, I do have questions about this bill, and I look forward to inquiring of the proponent regarding those matters. And if, after we've had debate and discussion, there are good ideas or serious unanswered questions, then I would invite the chamber to then make a motion to re-refer. But at this point, I think it's premature. Let's get the questions answered. And if there are good ideas that have not been incorporated in this bill and they are of such weight that we ought to re-refer, then let's take a look at it then. But I suggest that for the time being, we do not adopt this motion and return to debate on the principal bill. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Speaking to the motion, the chair recognizes Representative Fraunfelter of Wyandotte.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. As someone who's been around here for a few years and watched these programs come and go, and it's been very frustrating to sit on these committees, and as they're brought to you, ask, is there any way are we tracking this to find out if it's going to work? We've never done that. As a businessman, I sell products to industries. One of the ways I sell is we put it in, we track it, and find out if there is an ROI, or return on investment. If my product doesn't work any better or last any longer, then it doesn't work. We have done nothing, and as a state that spends taxpayers' money, we've done nothing to track these programs throughout the last 12 years I've been here, and there are a number of them. Our programs are supposed to bring business to us. Yes, they do. Now, take the machinery and equipment tax, the first one to go, I remember. We brought General Motors to save it in Kansas City, saved a plant, closed other ones around the state, and brought people in. So they brought people here to live. Winfield did it with Goodyear, with Rubbermaid too. They did the same thing, closed plants in Iowa, brought places down to Winfield. That's good. Take Peak. It was supposed to bring in the beginning, bring people in here from other states. Not necessarily do we mean Missouri across the state line, as we used it, as they call it, the start of the border war. How many of those people moved from Missouri to Kansas? Did it really do the job it was supposed to do? So I think this is a good first step. It's a positive first step to show our taxpayers, are we actually spending the money wisely for them? And I urge your support to send this, to put down this bill, a motion. Thank you.
Speaking of the motion, the chair recognizes Representative Francis of Seward.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You know, I don't want to keep going on and on, but we debated this bill in a committee. It passed overwhelmingly out of committee. There was a May 2017 Pew study that said Kansas is trailing other states because it has not adopted a plan for regular evaluation of tax incentives. We need information to be able to do that. This bill is a good first step in that way, and I'll be voting against the motion. Thank you.
Would anybody else like to speak to the motion? Seeing none, Representative Sawyer of Sedgwick.
I rise in opposition to the motion. The bill was pretty thoroughly vetted in committee. After the initial hearing, there was a lot of work done to make the bill better, and we ended up doing a substitute bill that we made a lot of changes to the bills, and without any specific reasons on why to send it back, and I have not heard that. I don't see any reason to go back to committee. I urge you to vote down the motion and support the bill today.
Would anybody else like to speak to the motion? Seeing none, Representative Baker, would you like to close?
Well, I think we saw who the card players are. When you show your cards before you go into the game, you're going to be handicapped. So I'll stand by my motion. I think we need to work on it a little bit more, but with that, I close. Thank you.
You heard the motion to refer House Bill 2572 back to the Tax Committee. All in favor say aye. All opposed say no. No. The noes appear to have it. The noes do have it. We're back on the bill. The chair recognizes Representative Carmichael of Sedgwick.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and glad to be here again. Would the carrier of the bill answer a few questions, please?
Yes, thank you.
First, Representative, I want you to know I think this is a very good bill, and I am so pleased that it got out of the Tax Committee. So my questions here are more for purposes of clarification and not an attempt to convince people not to support this bill. But there are some areas that do concern me a little bit. For example, the rural opportunity zones. Those of us from urban counties sometimes question their efficacy more than those of us from perhaps rural counties, as you could understand. But when we gather this information about the cost of the tax benefits from the RAWs, we're not going to have individually identifiable data. We're not going to know that Representative Smith or Jones, not anybody in particular, but that they took advantage of the program.
That's absolutely correct. The bill does not allow for individual names to be used.
But will it let us know what benefits flowed to Lacon County as opposed to what benefits might have flowed to Lane County?
Absolutely.
That's good, because I think you can appreciate that in trying to figure out what works and what doesn't, we need to know whose ox got gored. Okay, more questions. I'm sorry. Second question, though, as it relates to individually identifiable information. I understand that businesses, corporations, etc., I think we're going to know who the specific beneficiaries were. Is that correct?
For the Star Bonds districts, the principals and the officers would be listed rather than just the developer LLC.
Okay. Well, for example, and I don't know that this has happened, but if someone has a sole proprietorship and they qualify for a Star Bond, I mean, you'd have to be pretty rich, but if that happened, would we see their name as the person who benefited?
It's listed in the bill specifically principals and officers. I could clarify for that whether or not, but I would consider them being, well, they're sole proprietor. They don't have any other officers, so I could double check for you.
Yeah. But
would you like me to?
No, I just wanted to raise the concern so that, and this is going to the Senate hopefully, and so hope if there's, I won't take any more time. In addition, though, the bill also discusses circumstances, I'm sorry, I'm losing my words right now, but where people receive, for example, well, there's loan forgiveness programs. If you bring people, there was a bill last year, if you move to Kansas and you're an engineer, then you're going to get loan forgiveness and your employer is going to get tax credit. I assume we're going to know the name of the employer who got the tax credit.
Correct, as long as it was over $50,000 for the program.
Okay, and then that leads to another question. If the program overall is $50,000 statewide, but the benefit to Spirit Aviation is $5,000, do we know that Spirit took a tax credit?
Yes, you do, because it's searchable by the business, it's searchable by the county, it's searchable by the program.
Okay. Once it meets the 50,000 threshold, we won't be getting aggregate numbers, but we'll have itemized numbers so we can know which programs took the money and how it worked.
Correct. For
That's
each
great.
business, you could see what the total is that they may have received in incentives, even including property tax.
Okay. My final area of concern. This bill says that the Department of Revenue will provide data to the Department of Commerce, correct? Yes. Will they be providing individually identifiable taxpayer information, Or will they be providing just aggregate numbers?
They will be provided the things that are permittable in the bill. They will not be allowed to give social security numbers, total income, profits. They will only be able to provide the business entity's name, their address, their county, and the amount that they have received in that incentive.
So they will be in receipt of individually identifiable taxpayer information. It will say Spirit Aviation, Wichita, Kansas, 3200 South Oliver Street, and the amount that they received.
That is correct, and currently right now for sub-programs, though not mandated by statute, they are doing it.
Okay. I appreciate your kind attention. Obviously, I think this is a good bill. One of my concerns, though, had to do with providing individually identifiable taxpayer information to the Kansas Department of Commerce. Their sorry record is well known. 1 million Kansans' social security numbers distributed to the world. And so if, in fact, we are not disclosing anything to Commerce other than who and how much, I'm fine with it. But I have absolutely no trust or confidence in the Kansas Department of Commerce's ability to maintain the privacy of taxpayer information. Notwithstanding that, I stand in support of HB 2572. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Speaking to the bill, the chair recognizes Representative Elliott of Sedgwick.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. You know, I like the bill from the transparency standpoint. I have some issues on the disclosure part. When I was in economic development a few years ago at the Wichita Chamber, I learned that each project is very unique and the players are very unique and what they want disclosed and when. And so with that, I have an amendment.
The amendment appears short. The clerk will read.
Page 2, line 21 by striking and, by striking on lines 22 and line 23 by striking all before the period and inserting, except that information shall not be included as part of such update until at least 1 calendar year has passed since the recipient has received benefits from the Economic Development Incentive Program.
You may continue.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Well, as I just mentioned, the disclosure part, I know we've had some recent projects in Sedgwick County. One is Cargill. They're in the process of building a new building. And my point in the 1-year waiting period before disclosure is just to allow that building to be completed, the paint to be dry on it, and to have actual employees occupying it. So it's just a timing issue, and I think for anyone inquiring to the benefits that were offered, they can see tangible evidence of what their taxpayer dollars went to. Therefore, I'll stand for questions.
Does anybody wish to speak to the amendment? Chair recognizes Representative Williams of Sedgwick, Butler, sorry.
Thank you. To this amendment, I'm going to break it down and hear your options, and then you be the judge on what you think of it. The way that currently the bill is outlined is that when the economic incentive is provided and the Department of Commerce gives that to, or Department of Commerce receives that data, they have to have it the following fiscal year, before the end of the following fiscal year. So if I receive an incentive in 2017 and that information is provided then to the Department of Commerce to put it on their website, they have to get it in before the 2018, the end of the fiscal year. His says 1 year from the time in which you receive the incentive. If you want to split hairs over that, I'll let you do that. But I'm neutral at best. I know.
Does anybody else wish to speak to the amendment? Chair recognizes Representative Sawyer of Sedgwick.
Sorry. I'm just trying to look at the amendment. I guess I agree with the carrier of the bill, kind of leave it up to the will of the body. It just delays it by a year, but the information will still be available after that.
Chair recognizes Representative Carmichael of Sedgwick.
Would my friend from Wichita, the carrier of the amendment, stand for a question or two?
Yes, sir.
I do have some concerns. Okay. Help me understand again why it is we would want to delay receiving data that our Commerce Committee is going to need as soon as possible to deal with what some of us perceive to be abuses of star bonds.
Well, again, I think the fact that when the incentives are announced, there's a ribbon cutting, everybody's applauding. The project is really in its infancy. And in talking with my economic development folks in Wichita, who you know, they thought it would be, especially for these major projects like a Cargill and others, where you have a building time frame of X, you have a hiring process of X, which could go on for several months. That their feeling was, in the spirit of the release of the information, that it would provide more tangible evidence of what the tax dollars went to, and it I guess from a PR standpoint, it's a more positive experience for all the stakeholders.
Well, as is often the case, our friends in economic development in Wichita never visited with me about this, so I'm sorry that I have to talk to you about it. But what is the problem with going ahead and releasing the data? Because everyone knows it's preliminary and everyone knows that the program has only been in effect for a month or 6 months or it's a partial year. But what's the problem? I hate to use the word transparency, but why in the world would we want to hide this information for a year?
Well, Representative, I look at the transparency. When the project is announced to the press and to the public in general, that's part of your transparency. And it's just a matter of how much that press release details what was offered. That's up to the beneficiary and the provider to determine how much they disclose at the time we're cutting the ribbon.
Well, you and I seldom disagree, but with respect, why wouldn't you want the public to have a running tally of how what's referred to, I think, as tax expenditures? Why wouldn't you want the public to know right away? Why would you want to withhold it from them for a year? I don't understand.
Well, in my experiences in the trenches, when you make an announcement, there may be still some modification or fine-tuning to where it is not disclosable, say for a period of months. Just like the construction side, there may be customizing the training programs or other benefits. Again, every project has its uniqueness, every company has its uniqueness on the requirements, and it's not a one-size-fits-all.
I appreciate you answering my questions, Representative.
Welcome.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
As much as I hate to disagree with my friend who does know a lot about this, and certainly as much as I would hate to disagree with the people in Wichita who don't seem to remember my phone number, I don't think this is a good idea, okay? We have problems with star bonds right now. We don't need to put this off another year only so that that the actual expenditures and costs can't be provided to the legislature and the public as they're incurred. And the fact that the program might change in 6 months or a year, that's fine. But we need to know how much these tax benefits are costing the state of Kansas. And I think our constituents not only need to know it, they want to know it. So if you're concerned about transparency, today is not the day to hide this information for a year. Thank you.
The chair recognizes Representative Landwehr of Sedgwick.
Thank you. Would the carrier of the amendment stand for a question, please?
Yes, ma'am.
We're just kind of wondering, why we didn't hear this morning in our calendar.
Specifically, Representative, I was waiting on emails and phone calls to inquire about support for the bill, and we finally had that discussion after calendar.
Okay, so I guess all right, that's it. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. I guess I would stand in opposition to this primarily because I think if this was a major issue to our economic development folks in Wichita, and there's enough of them up here with different lobbyists, they know what bills are moving, they know when they're moving and where they're moving. I think that they would have contacted our delegation, and I haven't seen that, and I don't see any reason why we should carve out one business out of this bill any more than I would it carving out anyone else. So I would ask that you oppose the amendment.
Chair recognizes Representative Whitmer of Sedgwick.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I was also going to ask about calendar, but Body, I also haven't heard from the folks in Sedgwick County, and as an advocate for transparency, this is not transparent. Yesterday we debated for quite a while about what's good for the goose and what's good for the gander and making special carve-outs for certain groups. We don't need to do it here. Let's treat everybody equally, and I would suggest that we oppose this amendment. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
The chair recognizes Representative Corbett of Shawnee.
A question for the maker of the bill or amendment? Sorry. It seems like seems like a lot of time in this economic development that a lot of cities and municipalities have more than one deal brewing at the same time.
Right.
I think what's nice about your amendment is, the one thing nice about your amendment is, if you've got 2 or 3 deals going at the same time, it keeps things quiet long enough so if you've got another enterprise coming to town, maybe some other state won't get in on the information and try to steal that company to their state. I just think sometimes just a little bit of time might just keep all the chickens in the hen house till you get your job done. Thank you.
Yeah. The chair would like to take a moment to recognize former Representative Larry Turnquist from Salina up in the gallery. Would anyone else like to speak to the amendment? Seeing none, Representative Elliott, you may close.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Some of my colleagues asked about why South Central wasn't given a heads up by our economic development people. Having been part of that group, I stay in touch with them consistently. That's part of my passion, and of course, all of us do to inquire, but I continue to have a good rapport with them, and that's why I asked them and they responded back, and that's just called customer service. So, Mr. Chair, I'll close on my amendment.
You heard the motion to amend. All in favor say aye. Opposed say no. No. The noes appear to have it. The noes do have it. We're back on the bill. The chair recognizes Representative Ralph of Ford.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would certainly agree that we need to exercise our oversight on all of our economic development programs. We need to dig in there and find out what is being effective and useful and what isn't. The only concern that I would raise in regard to this particular legislation, and I'm not opposing it, but the legislation does indicate that we would disclose in the database any information that doesn't violate a confidentiality agreement that has been entered into as of July 1 of 2018, but I'm concerned then that that does raise an issue of all of the other contracts that have been entered into up to this point in time are potentially disclosable. I don't know that that's a problem, but I know that all of those contracts were negotiated and entered into without this belief, so that does raise a concern in my mind. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
The chair recognizes Representative Whipple of Sedgwick.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I know that we're towards the end here, so I'm just going to be quick and get to the point. I have an amendment.
The amendment appears long. Would you like to explain?
Yes, I would. In the interest of time, I'll just explain it now. It does two things. Given the press that we heard with the former excuse me, Secretary of Commerce, and I think that office has made us all aware about business practices that we might consider unethical. This amendment does two things. It says that if you are the Secretary for the Department of Commerce and you give a contract to a family member or a contract to a business partner, you have to disclose that on the website. So it's not saying you can't do that. It just says if you give a family member, someone who actually lives in your house, a contract from the state, or a business partner, someone who you might make money off of, you have to disclose that on the website. It's a transparency issue, and I think given the press that the former Secretary of Commerce negatively received a few months ago, this will go a long way in restoring the taxpayers' faith in the Secretary of Commerce office. So therefore, I will stand for questions.
Is there an objection to waiving the reading of the amendment? There is an objection. The clerk will read.
Page 3, following line 27, by inserting F, the Secretary of Commerce shall place a prominently displayed notice on the front page of the web page of the department, setting forth the name of the employee, association to the Secretary, date of employment and duties within 14 days of the acceptance of an offer of employment made by the Secretary to, number 1, a member of the Secretary's household or a family member, or number 2, a person who has or is associated with the Secretary in a corporation, limited liability corporation, partnership, limited partnership, business association, or professional service corporation as a partner or officer. On page 1 in the title, in line 3 after the second semicolon, by inserting disclosure of hiring of certain employees.
Would anybody like to? Chair recognizes Representative Weber of Sedgwick.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm going to challenge the germaneness of this amendment.
Germaneness has been challenged. Would the ruling, would the rules chair make a ruling? Chair recognizes the rules. Representative.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the body. The committee has reviewed the proposed amendment. The underlying bill concerns transparency, essentially, in the aggregation of data concerning economic development incentives and making that data public from the Department of Commerce. The amendment would place a duty specifically on the Secretary of Commerce to make certain disclosures about people that are employed. The committee finds that there is one point of contact and that both deal with the Department of Commerce and the duties thereof, but there is not a sufficient second contact with which the committee can find the amendment germane. This is a unanimous decision of the committee that the amendment is not germane.
Chair recognizes Representative Whipple.
Just want to say thank you to the committee chair and thank you to the Rules Committee. I respect their decision, and that would be all for me. Thank you.
Speaking to the bill, the chair recognizes Representative Gartner of Shawnee.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Would the carrier of the bill stand for a couple questions?
Yes.
Representative, I know you've worked very hard on this bill. Could you, when you were working on this bill and going through the process, I know part of that process was trying to look at different tax credits from various departments, Department of Revenue, Department of Commerce, Insurance Department. Did you find that to be an easy task?
No, it really wasn't. To pull all of it together, it was difficult to locate all of them.
So this bill should pull all that data together and make it much easier for our constituents to access that information?
Absolutely.
One further question. Yesterday we passed out a bill out of tax committee that really now will put into place a review process for evaluations of tax incentives and tax credits. Do you believe your bill will make that process much easier?
Absolutely. It'll go perfectly with the scheduling.
Thank you very much. I rise in support. You're going to see a bill hopefully in the next few days that puts a process in place, and it will make it much easier for the committees to acquire that information. So I hope you support House Bill 2572.
Would anyone else like to speak to House Bill 2572? Seeing none, Representative Williams would please close.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This bill allows organization of what can be sometimes overwhelming and sometimes chaotic exchange and compilation of information. It strengthens our current practices and it sets a framework for future analysis and evaluation. So for that, Mr. Chair, I move that when the committee rises and reports, it reports substitute for HB 2572 favorably for passage.
You've heard the motion by Representative Williams to report House Bill 2572 favorably. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. The ayes have it. The motion passes. That concludes general orders. The chair recognizes the majority leader.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move we rise and report.
You heard the motion. All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. We are concluded. Thank you. Motion.
The clerk will read.
Your Committee of the Whole recommends substitute for House Bill number 2572 be passed.
Representative Esau.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move adoption of the Committee of the Whole report.
You've heard the motion. All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed, no. The motion carried. The committee report is adopted. Reports of standing committee. The clerk will read.
Committee on Taxation recommends House Bill 2753 be amended. The bill be passed as amended. Committee on Taxation recommends House Bill 2756 be amended. The bill be passed as amended. Committee on Taxation recommends House Bill 2421 be amended. The bill be passed as amended. Committee on Taxation recommends House Bill 2489 be amended. The bill be passed as amended. Committee on Insurance recommends Senate Bill 267 be passed, and because the committee is of the opinion the bill is a non-controversial nature, be placed on the consent calendar. Committee on Insurance recommends Senate Bill 351 be passed. Committee on Corrections and Juvenile Justice recommends House Bill 2625 be amended. The bill be passed as amended. Committee on Health and Human Services recommends Senate Bill 398 be passed. Committee on Health and Human Services recommends Senate Bill 386 be passed. Committee on Federal and State Affairs recommends House Bill 2719 be passed. Committee on Federal and State Affairs recommends House Bill 2598 be passed, and because the committee is the opinion the bill is a non-controversial nature, be placed on the consent calendar. Committee on Federal and State Affairs recommends House Bill 2587 be passed. Committee on Agriculture recommends Senate Bill 194 be passed. Committee on Agriculture recommends Senate Bill 405 be passed. Committee on Agriculture recommends substitute for Senate Bill 414 be passed, and because the committee is of the opinion that the bill is of a non-controversial nature, be placed on the consent calendar.
Change of reference. House Bill 2751 is withdrawn from the Committee on Fed and State Affairs, referred to the Committee on Children and Seniors. Announcements. Representative Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. For the Tax Committee, to today's agenda, we will add House Bill 2770 for a hearing. It's a bill that relates to a project sales tax exemption in Ellis County. Any questions, feel free to contact me. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Representative Baker.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. On a much more positive note, we're going to have rural broadband lunch, and we're going to learn about Kansas Cable Telecommunications Association and all their initiatives in rural broadband, and that will be in 281 North immediately following the session. Thank you.
Representative Barker.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Fed and State will not meet tomorrow. I indicated to the committee this morning that we may meet tomorrow. We are not. See you next week. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Representative Ballard.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Democrats, we have Thursday Summit in 152 South. Our speaker is waiting, so on adjournment, if you will come quickly, we'd appreciate it. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Representative Whipple.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members of the Democratic Caucus, we will have agenda tomorrow at 8:15. 8:15 is when we'll have agenda tomorrow. Thank you again, Mr. Speaker.
Majority Leader Heinemann.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Republicans, we will have calendar review at 8:30 in the morning in the old Supreme Court room. I think half an hour will be enough. We'll see. Mr. Speaker, I move the House adjourn until Friday, March 9th at 9 a.m.
You've heard the motion. All in favor say aye. Opposed, no. We are adjourned.